Jennifer Vatsa from Belladonna's Botanicals. So, as promised, I have been talking about doing a video about my experiences with using ketamine um, as a medical treatment for my treatment-resistant depression, amongst other things. But one of the things I noticed with working with psychedelic medicine is that has been a strong spiritual component that goes along with it. I wish I kept better notes in my log, but or journaling afterwards, but the way ketamine works, and I think this is probably true of a lot of psychedelics, and the mechanism in which it affects your brain is that it for 3 to 7 days after your ketamine treatment, it opens up the neuroplasticity in your brain so that it makes you open to change, to new things, new ideas, and it's very helpful. In the process of when you do ketamine, you usually set an intention beforehand of something. Hello, Corey. That, if you're focusing on depression or inner child healing or trauma healing, anything of that, and it can be more elaborate, it can be very succinct, but it's usually good to have a point of focus for your each ketamine treatment, and it doesn't have to be the same every time, or it can be, but that's what sort of the preliminary process of it is. So there are currently 3 modalities in which you can get medical ketamine treatments, and it probably varies state to state depending on the legalities, but there are clinics that do ketamine infusions, which are very expensive. We're talking probably, $3,000 to $6,000 out of pocket because it's not covered by insurance. There's a type of ketamine called Spravato, which is a nasal ketamine, which is also done at clinics. The Spravato is covered by insurance, but the monitoring at the clinic is not, so you're spending another $3,000 to $4,000 right there. Or maybe a little more or less for the monitoring, because like with any psychedelic type thing, I mean, it's not recommended to do it alone. I mean, or at least, until you have a good grasp on it. You would have your sitter or watcher. It's very typical if you're doing LSD or mushrooms or things like anything in that psychedelic rubric. So, but there's also other things to monitor with ketamine, because it can, cause nausea, it can raise your blood pressure. Like, the mode that I am doing for ketamine is I do at-home treatments through a company called Mindbloom. And the way that's up is you get oral tablets. It's not the greatest process in the world. It's very bitter tasting, but it's not, I mean, I've had worse, but so you do it orally. Now, the way you do it orally is very specific. You have to hold the tablets and let them dissolve in your mouth for 7 minutes to absorb. It's not recommended to swallow it because that's going to trigger more of the anesthetic aspects of ketamine, because it is something that is used in like surgical anesthesia, and it can also make you nauseous. Now, I get anti-nausea tablets, which I take like an hour before I do my ketamine treatment. So I think I've done about 11 treatments so far. And I've had a really good experience with it. I mean, the best way I can describe ketamine, the experience of it, is it's kind of like taking a trippy nap. But it also has very different it's very different experientially with your eyes open versus your eyes closed. I kind of prefer it. I feel like I get more out of it when my eyes are closed. And I've tried different sort of what they talk about set and setting for it. So, you want to be in a quiet space. Mindbloom on their app provides like binaural beats, audio, ambient audio tracks, which which you can listen to during that. I've also listened to guided meditations during it. I've done a few where I usually put my eye mask on, and I have I find headphones, like the noise canceling ones, too clunky and uncomfortable, as same with earbuds. So I have something called sleep phones. I don't know if I have it handy, but it's basically like a headband that has like the speaker in it, so it kind of goes over your ears. You could get them on Amazon. They're probably like $20 or $30, something like that. But it's much more comfortable, and you can sync it to your phone or whatever device. And because it's Bluetooth, so well, now it's Bluetooth. It used to plug in when you had when iPhones and iPods, had the plug, that you could plug headphones in. So for me, I put on the headphones and like my and my eye mask, because not that I don't have my own. I like to sleep with eye masks on, because I find the comfort of having the pressure on my eyes helps me fall asleep. Although right now I'm having a little trouble with that because I'm using my CPAP machine for sleep apnea, and if I put an eye mask on, I'm like, because of my sensory processing, I'm like, there's too many things on my face, so it's like one or the other. But that's probably why I'm recording videos at 3 o'clock in the morning. So the experience of the ketamine treatment, at least for me, I don't know if it's longer, if you do it oral or the nasal ketamine, but it lasts about 45 minutes to an hour for me. I just kind of have a trippy little nap where I'm kind of walking around inside my brain. I've set my intention, and maybe sometimes I'm kind of focusing a little bit on that, but usually I just kind of see where my brain goes on its little journey. And what I've found in that is that it taps into there's definitely a spiritual component and access with psychedelic medicine. Like, I've only done psilocybin like once, but it's a really interesting conversation with the trees. They're awesome. But yeah, it's like the first treatment I had, it's like I ended up in like the Temple of Anubis. It was very, very like ridiculously out of scale, large, like, the statues, were like hundreds of feet tall, like the size of skyscrapers. Um and I've encountered and had conversations with my spirit guides. I've seen Lucifer come through in his many great forms, and have kind of come to a lot of different sort of spiritual gnosis about things or making connections. But in that process, I'm also working to heal my depression, and kind of coming to, well, okay, this is something I struggle with. How do I break the cycle? It's like I can treat the situational depression that's caused by whatever, the past 3 years, say, of life in the universe we live in. But it's kind of like the internal things. Like, one of the most powerful healings that I did with one of my therapists was because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it opens up your neuroplasticity and makes you very open to new uh, ideas and concepts. And she had walked me through something. It's like a guided kind of meditation. It's something within, I don't know if it's an ego state therapy or EMDR or IFS, internal family systems parts work, but it was like the mythical parent structure. And it basically kind of builds this mythos, especially if you have a lot of childhood trauma and upheaval and inner child healing that needs to be done, or if you've had like tumultuous relationships with family and all that. But she did this, I don't know how long it lasted, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. It was right after I finished, like, I was like, okay, I'm done with the, trippy nap part. And I kind of just, went back in, put on my eye mask and, went through, because I was in such, because I was in that open neuroplasticity state. The way this process goes is it takes you from conception or even preconception to like the first few years of your life. So like it's a visualization and meditation of like being in your utero. And there were parts of it where it was so visceral, where I could like feel myself in utero, kind of like, moving and like pressing my hand on my, from the inside on my mother's stomach, that sort of thing. But once I'd done that, I realized that resolved the vast majority of any childhood trauma and attachment injuries that I had just through that one part of it. So that's something that is really compelling about psychedelic medicine for me. It's not something I have to take every day, because I've had terrible experiences with antidepressants and antipsychotics. I mean, the only things that I'm on right now is like, when I remember to take it, my Adderall for my ADHD, and I take a low dose of Klonopin, which is my antidepressant, because antidepressants don't actually work for me. So the only medications I really have good luck with are anxiolytics of the benzodiazepines. Save for Xanax, fuck that shit. Did not like Xanax. I just had a bad experience coming off of it the last time I was on it, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Not good. I'm like, not touching that one again. But so one of the things to consider with something like ketamine, and also with doing other types of psychedelic medicine, is that the way it affects your neuroplasticity, not just during the session itself of when you're doing the medicine, is that it's for three, like with ketamine, they say it can, your neuroplasticity is kind of malleable for the next 3 to 7 days. And that's why they also suggest at least having a 7 to 14 days in between each treatment, because you would just be in a perpetual state of your brain being kind of like wide open. But one of the things they suggest during that malleable neuroplasticity stage is to really be mindful of integrating yourself back into your body, back into reality, and in the mind space for change. And in that, staying away from triggering media, whether that be social media or the news or movies, because that can influence, because your brain's all open and squishy and open to all sorts of new ideas. You can suddenly start believing something that is very contradictory to what you would have believed previously. Like suddenly you might go from, you know, Okay, so I admit it. My guilty pleasures. I love disaster movies. I've watched them all a zillion times. The cheesier, the better, or the more, big budget Hollywood theatrical. Awesome. I love disaster films. I always have. Now, if I was to do nothing but watch disaster movies and documentaries and things like that during that time in which my neuroplasticity was malleable, I could suddenly start becoming paranoid and convinced the world was coming to an end. If I watched 2012 or, the day after tomorrow or something like that. Sorry. That you can like start becoming like almost brainwashed into thinking things that seeing the signs and the synchronicities and all the stuff that, and you can convince yourself that you're in that state, and it takes a little while to reintegrate back in to uh the reality we live in. So I mean there are some things to consider when doing psychedelics. Like I know a lot of people who microdose, like psilocybin and things like that. And I don't have a problem with it, but it's also like you kind of have to be careful that you're not, especially if you have any underlying mental health issues, that you're not, that the lines of reality aren't completely blurring into oblivion at that point. Because I mean I've had experiences like that myself. Like, um I never really had a drug problem. I had a drug solution. um I joke, but I've done a lot of drugs in my life, and like I know there's been times I never particularly liked ecstasy because, and I think now looking back at some of my drug experiences and the weird reactions I had to them, was like ecstasy just fucked with my like neurodivergent sensory processing. And like the last time I did ecstasy, I got so sick on it. Like it was like my skin felt like molasses covered leather, and everything that touched me, including like the sheets, felt like alien suction, slimy tentacle suction cup things. And I was just like, get the sheets off me. They're so gross. I just couldn't get into it. Like I had a hard time with that one. And I yeah, my ex-husband's been in recovery for years, but it was just always, I'd always be like, I'd do a line or two of coke and be like, I'm hungry and want to take a nap. Um because it was the stimulant of that was somehow like leveling out my ADHD. So it wasn't necessarily giving me the, I'm like, damn, this Coke is shitty. I want to take a nap and eat a sandwich. Maybe it wasn't shitty Coke. Maybe it was just my neurodivergence. But like I've had sleep deprivation, hallucinations from like, yeah, meth binges and things like that. And um but it really just kind of warps your sense of reality for a time. And I mean, I never got heavily into it. I was more like an occasional weekend warrior for those things, not like an everyday consumer. But sometimes I wonder how I'm still alive. But anyways, it's like after doing a night of coke, let's go home and crush up some Percocet and Valium and snort that and go to bed. How I'm still alive, I'm not entirely sure. Do not recommend. Don't try this at home, kids. Um, but yeah. So I mean, getting back on topic, is that I feel like there's a lot of value in not only psychedelic medicine, but also in plant medicine. That figures a lot into what I do with like the flying ointments and things that I make. With a lot of states decriminalizing marijuana and things of that nature, things are more accessible. I have to I get my medical marijuana license renewed because I forgot to do that back in December. But like I get in Philly or in Pennsylvania, it may have changed, but the edibles weren't available for distribution through the medical marijuana dispensaries. But you could get the stuff is called RSO. It's like it's like in a syringe that you can kind of make your own edibles or gummies. It's just really hard to monitor the dosage of, because it's like, use a quarter of a grain of rice for, I'm like, fuck do I get a quarter of a grain of rice out of this thing? Anywho, yeah, I've had a couple of times I'm like, oh wow, there goes my soul leaving my body, flying. Like, some of those things for me can just immediately trigger like astral travel. So like the RSO medical marijuana stuff will knock me the fuck out of my body in no time flat. And one of the non-medical, like the CBD kratom or kratom, I don't know how it's pronounced, places, you don't need a medical marijuana license to buy stuff. I mean, they have THC, CBD, and all these things. But I've gotten Amanita muscaria gummies from them. There's a little bit of I've seen a few people kind of comment concern about that, because like some of them also do have, there's some that are just the Amanita muscaria gummies, and some of them have Amanita and HHC, which is another derivative like THC. But holy hell, those fucking gummies knock me the fuck out of my body. I did one, I think it was New Year's Eve. I think I took it at 10 p.m. It's one of those ones where you're like, oh, there it is. Holy hell. All right, I'm going to lay down now. And I'm laying in bed. I was facing the windows, and I became aware that fireworks were going off. And I was like, so confused as to, I'm like, who blows up fireworks on New Year's Eve? I mean, I guess it's midnight. I didn't know fireworks were associated with New Year's Eve. I guess I completely forgotten that. I also had the gnosis that the universe was run by cats, but that's an entire different thing. But I remember laying there in bed being like, body, you just need to roll over onto the other side. Come on, we can do this. We can do this. Because sometimes, some of these things have bodily effects to them, in the physicality of how you move, emotion, and which is why it's also recommended to have a sitter with you. Like the first time I had done psilocybin at my friend's house, they were having a hippie drum circle thing, and I text her from the background. I'm like, come get me, I forgot how to use my body. I think I had to go to the bathroom or something. I'm like, I have to pee, I don't know how to get up. Ketamine's similar in that, like, you want to pee beforehand, because it oh, the only way I can describe it is like, it's almost like a weightless feeling. Like you feel like you got no bones. It's just like, you're kind of like, I know I'm walking, I know I'm touching myself, but nothing feels kind of attached appropriately, which is very different from like the stimulant based drugs like meth or ecstasy that are very like tactile based. So, yeah, it's just kind of a little bit about my psychonautic experiences, I guess. But just to kind of, wrap up, which I noticed every time I say I'm going to wrap up or conclusion, there's usually 10 minutes more of me talking in a video. But I've had really good success with using the ketamine for my treatment-resistant depression and CPTSD. I highly recommend it for that, if it's available to you. Mindbloom is excellent. It's the most affordable of all the programs that I've seen. Like, when I first did they've changed the structure a little bit, but when I first did I did the first 6 sessions, it was maybe about $800-900. They do have payment plans, which is awesome. So it's not like you have to do it all up front. You could just do like a couple $100 every month or whatever. The financing is for that. The second round was less expensive. It was maybe like I did for another 6 sessions. I think it was like maybe 200 a month. And I think they do a subscription service. I don't know if it's 1 or 2 treatments a month for like $200. I have to look into that. I still have one more treatment left on the second plan, but it's definitely much more affordable than, thousands of dollars on the infusions or Spravato. So yeah, I mean, and there's times I've used it for when I've felt energetically and spiritually blocked, like I wasn't connecting to spirit in the same way. It helps to kind of open that up and remove some blockages as well. And then you also get the benefit of, hey, I did not have seasonal depression for the first time in like a million years. So um and as someone who has been struggling with depression since I was about 10 years old, I think that was the first 9 or 10, that was the first time um I remember saying to my grandmother, she was like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Depressed." Like somehow I knew. Like I don't know it like at 9 or 10 years old, like how I had knowledge of the word depression and what it meant, but it's something I've struggled with all my life, and I've had more harm than good come from most medications that I've had. The only treatment I did have that worked really well was the transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is also very expensive, and insurance is a dick about covering it. They wanted to give me electroconvulsive therapy. Well, we'll cover electroconvulsive therapy. I'm like, how about no? I don't want my brains fried. Um, but anywho, highly recommend it. And it's been I've woven in some of the stories as I've talked about things in other videos with various experiences I've had spirituality wise with ketamine, but I just kind of wanted to do a larger kind of big picture kind of talk about it. And with anything, you need to do these things responsibly. I mean, it's not for everyone. I mean, if you have a history of drug and alcohol abuse and are in recovery, you probably are not going to do that as a treatment if needs be. You might be able to. It's up to the individual. Some people are very, vigilant about, their sobriety, and it's kind of like, well, for people who are alcoholics and addicts, they're like, well, one glass of wine is not gonna, my brain is just gonna parse that as, let's go do heroin now. Like it just, the mechanism there isn't built in to stop or to know when to stop. So if you have addiction issues or problematic drinking or excessive drug use issues, I would definitely talk to, well, I mean, with you obviously have to go through the doc, be screened and go through the doctor, see if you're an ideal candidate for it. So but I think it's really been revolutionary. I hope it becomes more accessible and more affordable in the future. And yeah. And on that note, I'm going the fuck to sleep because it is 3:33. Ooh, synchronicity on, time and shit. Anyways, love y'all. And maybe I will remember that one last thing I wanted to put in here, but forgot. But probably not because it's late. and I should go to bed. Anyways, love y'all.